When I first moved into an HOA-run neighborhood, I expected some basic rules. Keep the lawn neat, don't paint my house neon green, and take my trash bins in on time. What I didn't expect were rules so insane, so absurd, that they felt like something out of a dystopian novel. As I started talking to neighbors and researching other HOA communities, I realized that I wasn't alone. Across the country, HOAs had been enforcing some of the most ridiculous and unfair regulations imaginable. What you're about to hear are some of the most insane HOA horror stories ever recorded. One of the first cases I stumbled across was in a quiet suburban community where an HOA fined homeowners for leaving their garage doors open for more than 15 minutes. It didn't matter if you were unloading groceries, working on your car, or letting your kids grab their bikes. If a board member or HOA enforcer saw your garage door open past the allowed time, you'd be hit with a fine. Some residents received multiple fines in a single day simply because they had the audacity to use their own garages. Then there was the case of an HOA that had banned children from playing outside. The reasoning? It disrupted the peace of the community. That's right. No bike riding, no sidewalk chalk, no playing catch in the front yard. One family received repeated violation notices because their toddler's toy car was unsightly in the driveway. Eventually, they were threatened with legal action if they didn't keep their kids and all their toys out of sight at all times. But nothing prepared me for the story of a man who was fined for having the wrong shade of grass. This homeowner, let's call him Mark, spent months maintaining his lawn, following every HOA rule. But one day he received a citation stating that his lawn contained too much Bermuda grass and not enough Kentucky bluegrass, which was the HOA-approved type. The fine? $2,000. When Mark argued that he had bought the house with that exact lawn, the HOA's response was simple. Not our problem. In another nightmare scenario, an HOA in Florida banned parked cars in driveways overnight. Homeowners were required to fit all their vehicles inside their garages, no matter how many they had. If you had guests over or owned multiple cars, tough luck. Residents who violated the rule received a $100 fine per night. Some homeowners were even forced to sell their extra vehicles just to comply. I started realizing that HOAs weren't just enforcing community standards. They were actively making homeowners' lives miserable for no good reason. I reached out to people in other states, asking about their worst HOA experiences, and the stories I heard only got worse. One homeowner told me about an HOA that required residents to ask for written permission to decorate for holidays. If you wanted a wreath on your door or lights on your house, you had to submit a formal request 30 days in advance and wait for approval. One woman was fined $500 for putting up a Halloween decoration one day early. Then there was the man who installed solar panels to save money on his electricity bill, only for his HOA to demand they be removed because they disrupted the uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood. He refused, so the HOA began fining him $250 a week. I had uncovered dozens of these horror stories, but I knew there had to be more. I decided to dig deeper, reaching out to people who had fought back against their HOAs, and what I discovered next was even more shocking. As I continued my search for the most absurd HOA rules, I came across cases that were so outrageous, they seemed unreal. But every single one of them had actually happened, and in most cases, the homeowners had no choice but to comply or face financial ruin. One of the most infuriating cases was a couple in Texas who had been fined for planting flowers. The HOA's rulebook stated that only approved vegetation was allowed in front yards, and the couple's flower bed, filled with bright marigolds and petunias, was apparently an eyesore. They were given two options: remove the flowers or face a $100 fine per day until they did. Their argument that flowers increased curb appeal didn't matter. The HOA's word was final. Then there was the story of a retired veteran who had placed a small American flag on his porch. A simple act of patriotism, right? Not according to his HOA. He received a violation notice stating that flags were not allowed unless they were pre-approved by the board. When he refused to take it down, the fines started rolling in. Eventually, the case escalated into a lawsuit, and after months of legal battles, the HOA lost. But not every homeowner is able to fight back like that. Another case that left me speechless involved an HOA that required homeowners to keep their garage doors open at all times during daylight hours. Their reasoning? To prevent illegal activity. Of course, this rule led to a surge in thefts and break-ins, but the HOA refused to change the policy. One homeowner, furious after his tools were stolen, ignored the rule and kept his garage closed, only to wake up to a $500 fine taped to his door. It was becoming clear that many HOAs weren't actually protecting property values or maintaining communities. They were abusing their power simply because they could. One of the most heartbreaking stories I found involved a woman named Lisa, who had recently lost her husband. She decided to repaint her front door as a way of freshening up the home they had shared for years. She chose a soft shade of blue. Nothing wild, nothing neon, just a gentle pastel. Within a week, she was hit with a $1,500 fine. According to the HOA, only 3 shades of brown were allowed for front doors, and hers had to be repainted immediately. When she tried to appeal, she was ignored. When she refused to pay, the HOA placed a lien on her house. Lisa's case wasn't unique. Across the country, HOAs have been known to weaponize fines and liens to force homeowners into submission, or worse, to take their homes. I started to notice a pattern. The rules were often vague, selectively enforced, and designed to make money for the HOA. The more stories I uncovered, the more I realized just how terrifying these organizations could be. HOAs had the power to turn homeownership, something that should be a dream, into an absolute nightmare. And the worst part? Most homeowners had no idea what they were signing up for until it was too late. I had seen enough. I wanted to know, was there any way to fight back against these ridiculous rules? That's when I started reaching out to the people who had done just that. The homeowners who had gone head-to-head with their HOAs and won. What I learned next changed everything. I had spent weeks collecting stories of the most absurd HOA rules, but now I wanted to know about the people who had fought back and actually won. Was it even possible to take on an HOA and come out victorious? As it turns out, yes. But it wasn't easy. One of the first cases I looked into involved a man named James who had been fined for parking his truck in his own driveway. The HOA claimed that trucks were not in line with the aesthetic of the neighborhood, despite the fact that James's truck was brand new and well-maintained. When he refused to move it, the fines started piling up. He was threatened with legal action, but James did something unexpected. He sued the HOA first. Using local property laws, James's attorney argued that the HOA had no legal right to enforce vehicle restrictions that weren't explicitly outlined in the original homeowner agreements. The lawsuit dragged on for months, but in the end, the HOA lost. Not only were James's fines dropped, but the HOA was also forced to pay his legal fees. Then there was the case of an elderly couple who had been fined for planting vegetables in their backyard. Their small garden, which had been there for years, suddenly became an issue when the HOA updated landscaping rules. But the couple refused to back down. They reached out to local media, and within days the story went viral. Public pressure mounted, and soon the HOA was forced to reverse its decision to avoid a PR disaster. Another homeowner I spoke with, a woman named Sarah, had been threatened with eviction because her mailbox was half an inch too tall. It sounded ridiculous, but the HOA was relentless, issuing daily fines and even attempting to place a lien on her property. Instead of complying, Sarah took a different approach. She ran for the HOA board. At the next election, she and several other frustrated homeowners successfully voted out the old board members and replaced them with people who actually wanted to serve the community. Within weeks, dozens of ridiculous rules were abolished, and a full audit was launched into the previous board's actions. The result? Multiple board members were caught embezzling HOA funds. These stories proved one thing. While HOAs might seem untouchable, they can be beaten. The key was knowledge, persistence, and sometimes a little public pressure. But while these victories were inspiring, they were also rare. For every homeowner who fought back and won, there were hundreds more who lost their homes, their savings, and their peace of mind trying to stand up against an HOA's abuse of power. I realized then that this wasn't just about unfair rules or greedy fines. This was about a system that had too much control over people's lives, and unless homeowners stood together, nothing would ever change. That's when I decided it was time to take this fight to the next level. Hearing the stories of homeowners who had successfully fought back gave me hope, but it also made one thing clear. Change doesn't happen unless people stand together. HOAs thrived on fear, isolation, and the assumption that homeowners wouldn't challenge them. But when people did challenge them, they often won. I decided to dig even deeper into the legal side of HOAs. What I found was shocking. Many of these organizations operated in gray areas of the law, enforcing fines and rules that weren't legally binding. Some HOAs even relied on intimidation tactics rather than actual legal authority. The problem? Most homeowners didn't know their rights. They assumed that if the HOA sent them a fine, they had to pay it. That's how HOAs got away with so much abuse. So I started reaching out to lawyers, consumer advocates, and even former HOA board members who had turned against the system. What I learned could have saved thousands of homeowners from financial ruin. Here are just a few key things. 1. Many HOA fines are unenforceable. If a fine isn't backed by the original governing documents or wasn't voted on properly, it can often be challenged and overturned. 2. HOAs can't just take your home. While they can place liens on properties, many states have passed laws limiting HOA foreclosure power. But homeowners often panic and comply before realizing they have legal options. Moondrum. Most HOA board members aren't professionals. Many of them have no legal background, no real authority beyond the bylaws, and often make up rules as they go along. 4. Public pressure works. Homeowners associations hate bad press. If you're dealing with an unfair rule, bringing in local media or social media attention can force them to back down faster than any lawyer. Armed with this knowledge, I started sharing what I had learned. I connected with homeowners' rights groups and began spreading awareness about how people could fight back. And the more people I talked to, the more I realized. This problem wasn't just about a few crazy rules. It was about control. Homeowners associations were originally created to protect property values and create safe, well-maintained communities. But somewhere along the way, many of them became power-hungry dictatorships. The worst ones weren't just enforcing rules. They were running scams, using fear to control homeowners and drain them of their money. But there's one thing they didn't count on: homeowners waking up. Over the last few years, more and more people have been pushing back. Some are successfully getting abusive HOA boards removed. Others are filing lawsuits and winning. States are starting to pass laws restricting HOA power and preventing them from weaponizing fines and liens against homeowners. And that's the real lesson in all of this. HOAs are not invincible. They only have as much power as homeowners allow them to have. The second people start standing up, questioning the rules and demanding fairness, the entire system starts to shake. So if you ever find yourself in an HOA horror story, know that you're not alone. And more importantly, know that you can fight back. Because at the end of the day, your home is yours, not the HOA's. And that's a battle worth fighting.